Welcome to Screen Drafts, the podcast where experts and enthusiasts competitively collaborate in the creation of screen-centric best of lists. Live here from Panic Fest 2021. Live. I am Draft Commissioner Clay Keller. Here with me, as always, my co-commissioner and color commentator, Mr. Ryan Marker.
We're going live.
Woo! Ryan,
yes.
Do you have an appropriate prop that you would like to hold up? Both of our guest GMs are presenting topic appropriate props. Do you have any Hellraiser or Pinhead paraphernalia at the ready that you could hold up?
When I think of watching the Hellraiser franchise, this is what I think of: my shot glass. Because I need many shots to get through these movies.
Oh, such shots to show you. I saw many of these for the first time preparing for this, and I had a hoot. I had a hoot of a time.
Oh, they're amazing. These toys that these guys are showing.
Graham has held up multiple. I would be so uncomfortable. What if you wake up in the middle of the night and look at that?
First of all, that does not look like Pinhead at all.
That doesn't look like Pinhead. Is that some sort of a...
I'm really happy to be Pinhead.
It looks like Apocalypse from X-Men. It's so funny.
We are, of course, drafting the Hellraiser movies today, live on Twitch here from Panic Fest. We've got two of our absolute favorite guest GMs with us for this tonight. We've got on one side of the virtual draft table, Mr. Graham Skipper. Graham, and on the other side, Graham's number one choice for his collaborative competitor here this evening. We had to bring back another one of our absolute favorites, Dr. Rebecca McKendry.
Woo! Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Becca and Graham. And of course, I should mention we have another special guest here with us for tonight's live show. It is one of the guys in charge of all of the madness you've been seeing at Panic Fest. He's going to be joining us as our guest producer and guest sort of audience coordinator here on the Twitch board. Give a round of applause for Adam Roberts. Oh, that's too bad. You've got a nice sort of like violent bear over your right shoulder. Right. Yes. You're in a full tuxedo. I mean, we thought that all of Graham's Pinhead stuff was impressive. You've got, I see just at a glance, 45 different puzzle boxes behind you there. So you're clearly a dedicated Hellraiser fan yourself. Well, we'll unpack that later. First, I want to talk to Graham Skipper. Graham, I said we're doing a Panic Fest live show. Do you have any ideas? I was sort of joking because at any given time you have off the top of your head 65 screen drafts ideas. But you said, why don't we do Hellraiser? I said, sounds good, dude. Let's do it. Yeah. And you said, I got to get Rebecca. What is it? We're going to talk about your individual histories with this still ongoing, like 35-year franchise. And what is your history with the old Pinhead and the guy with the CDs stuck in him and all the other Cenobites?
So my first introduction to Hellraiser was, and I've told this story probably on the show before, but when I was a young lad.
We've never talked about Hellraiser before, ever.
Well, then, okay, well.
Maybe Hellraiser 2 on the horror sequels? Maybe?
No. Maybe. We talked about Hellraiser 3 on the 1992 draft. We did talk about that.
That's right. That's right.
But, yeah, so when I was 12 or 13, I went on a quest to learn everything I could about horror. Went to my local video store, asked the video store clerk, I want to know all the slashers. I want to know all the icons. I want to know about Jason and Freddy. Give me the movies. And so the guy gave me he gave me Nightmare on Elm Street. He gave me Halloween. He gave me Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He gave me Friday the 13th Part 3. He told me to skip the first two, which, maybe not so good advice. And then he gave me Hellraiser. And he said, save Hellraiser for last. That one's going to fuck you up. And it did. And it was definitely the one that stood out amongst those icons of being the strangest, the most unconventional, And one of the ones that really stuck with me and throughout the years, this franchise in particular has been one that I've just really gravitated to. I watch all 10 of these movies at least once a year. I love this franchise.
Wow.
I think every single movie in this franchise is very special in its own way. They are all children that I love equally for different reasons. Not equally, but there are like 3 that I love equally.
Rank your children.
There are like 3 that I love equally, and then 7 that I'm like, you guys live in the basement, but I love you all very much the same. So yeah, that's my history with Hellraiser. I love it a lot. And of course, when you asked who would you want to draft with you, there's only one person that I know that is an author of actual canon in the Hellraiser franchise, and that's Dr. Rebecca McHenry.
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, you held up in the opening there 2 beautifully illustrated there Hellraiser books, and I typed in Rebecca McHenry Hellraiser into the old Google machine, and it brought back a piece where you said it was your favorite horror franchise of all time. Tell us about your journey to hell there.
So I saw Hellraiser way too young. My parents did not give a shit what I rented when I was a kid. As long as I had good grades, I basically lived kind of free range. And so I rented Hellraiser like as soon as it came out. And I was at best like maybe 11, 12 years old, and watched it by myself and had no clue what was going on. It's weird when you watch stuff that young, like the sexual stuff was completely over my head. I got that Julia was like seducing people, but I didn't catch most of the innuendos in it. But what I did catch was the gore, the heavy amounts of gore, and the weird hell stuff. And that I found really captivating and fascinating, even as like way too young adolescent. And then where it led me was to the comic books. So in the 90s, there was this big line of comic books that they did. And each one of them was kind of a standalone episode of Hellraiser. So sometimes they would have Pinhead in them, but sometimes they were completely different Cenobites. And it was just, I loved those so much. And it just fed me constantly throughout the 90s. So by middle school, I was reading those comic books. And then, and I still have this, for Christmas one year, my parents got me this. And I have no idea where they even found this thing.
Wow.
But it was published in 1992. And it is a Stephen King, Clive Barker illustrated guide to the masters. And what it does is it goes through every single one of their publications, like even the weird shit. And it does an in-depth dive into it. So I remember reading this, and it was like going through each one of the books of blood. So even before I had read the books of blood, I had read all about them. Hellraiser ended up becoming my favorite franchise out of all of them. Like most people, they have their Halloween, they have their Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, but Hellraiser has always been the one that I really gravitate towards. So much so that one of my legs is covered in Hellraiser tattoos. And so it's just always been, where I have found the most interest. I've read all the stories. And then once I really started shifting more into academia, I started getting really into kind of studying the mythos as a whole, more kind of in the Clive Barker mythos of like, how does hell function? How is it political? And we can get into all of that in a second. But kind of like where it draws the lines. And then from all of those various works, I started working with Clive Barker's company on a couple of different things. So when they relaunched the comic lines a couple of years ago, I basically called up Seraphim and was like, look, guys, we got a dialogue going right now. I will like cut off arms and let you pierce them if you let me pitch on some of the comics. And we ended up writing in 3 of the volumes. And so
nice.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it was seriously like my holy shit. This is it. And I ended up getting to pitch on the television show a bunch of times. It's changed hands so many times. I know that they're redoing it now, but just even getting to create stories in that world was just like 11-year-old me, kind of coming full circle. So yeah,
wow.
Hellraiser's been my jam.
And then Rebecca, all of that building up to this, just the top of the mountain. This is all this was leading to the ultimate Hellraiser experience, the pain and the ecstasy of screen drafts.
Here we are.
Rebecca,
Hellraiser is something I'd seen the first movie about 10 years ago when I was starting to dive deep into horror. But it is something that I avoided for a long time because I think Pinhead might be the scariest thing that parents ever allowed to be put like on the cover of VHS boxes that people could see out in public. I'm a little surprised there was never some sort of like 80s satanic panic uproar to get those taken off the shelves, because that is some iconography that pun intended kind of sticks in your head.
And that is how like the franchise was born, because when Pinhead was created, if you go back and read like the original Hellbound Heart or even in the first movie, he is just credited as lead Cenobite. But when you're looking at a movie like this, you have two choices. You could put Skinless Frank on the cover or you could put Pinhead on the cover. And they opted for Pinhead. And so it was a smart move. But by doing that, they really did cement that from now on, if you have something Hellraiser, Pinhead has to go along with it. And so that's something that we can talk about, how now, like when you see the sequels or reboots and people are like, trying to do different things with different Cenobites, there's always going to be a percentage of the population that's like, no, fuck you, Pinhead. It's only Pinhead.
Right.
I love the idea that, in the first movie, Pinhead is and we'll talk about this stuff more in depth and get to it, but he is sort of this like functionary for hell. And if he had just kept the name lead Cenobite, that would have been amusing. By like the third, fourth movie, when people are being like, fuck you, it'd be like, fuck you, lead Cenobite. That would have been very amusing to me. When I saw a lot of these movies for the first time, and I didn't really have any conception that they were tied into this more interesting and like psychosexual version of hell until I watched just the other day movies 2, 3, 4, 5. It is interesting that more movies haven't sort of utilized it, like Hieronymus Boschi's type of view of hell, and hell and devil stuff in movies is usually like demon, like possession, and very exorcists and the battle versus the church. And I love in this movie when Pinhead just rolls into a church and just fucks it all the way up. That it's in the third one, I think. I'm looking forward to talking about that if we get there. So this is all new for me, and especially because a lot of the theatrical ones hit when I was much, much, much too young to see any of them. Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Hellraiser, Pinhead, in iconography that must have pervaded your childhood. But I believe, like me, you didn't see a lot of these movies until like the last couple of days.
Well, that's not exactly true.
Or you hadn't seen them in a while.
The first two I've seen a few times, actually. Yeah. In fact, probably the most traumatic experience of my young childhood was the second film, which was the first one I saw. It was at a kid's all-night horror like birthday party. And,
I'm so jealous of how many sleepovers you went to when you were a kid.
I went to
I went to like 2 sleepovers, but you've had sleepover anecdotes for so many movies that we've talked about on this show.
Well,
you must have been very popular, Ryan.
I was a D&D kid, so that's just that's like
very popular. It's
dude. Yeah. But no, that movie and that night, I think I'll forever remember, like till the day I die. Like I was literally pissing in my pants. I could not sit up. It was such a traumatic night because I did pee a little in my pants because there was a certain scene that just fucked me up. And I couldn't stand up because then everybody would know I pissed on my pants. It was just one of those nights where you're like, as a fucking 12-year-old, it is like a nightmare on so many levels. And meanwhile, like, of course, they crank the movie up so loud, right? Like the kids are just like, let's fuck them up, and like, it's so chaotic and insane. And I was just shaking, I think, by the end. I mean, the movie was unlike any other horror movie I had seen prior to that. I'm a young Christian kid. I don't see too many horror movies, but I had seen a bunch in these sleepovers that I was going to. That this was just on a whole other fucking level. And I mean, we're kind of toying with that with each of our introductions. I think that these movies have really kind of messed with us in a big way. And because of those reasons, I actually stayed away from the sequels for a long time, just because I was just like, God, it's just not my thing. That said, I was going to ask you, Rebecca, as a comic books kid, I did see those comic books on the shelf constantly. And because of that, Because of that experience of that sleepover and watching those first two, I was constantly drawn back to those comic books because they were gorgeously done. I mean, these were not your standard. It was like early 90s where everything looks like shit.
Yep.
Everything still looks like the old school, like, made on crappy paper and like it's just terrible artists and all, it's just kind of old school.
Gorgeous.
These were like, these were like graphic novels, every single one of them. They were just like on another level and not scary, really kind of beautiful and just kind of ingeniously like written. And I would read those. I would never buy them. I would always just read them there at the store. And they really stuck with me in a big way. I've been looking for them forever. And I was going to ask you, who was the company? Was it a DC thing or no?
It was a shoot off of one of the major companies, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but it was a shoot off. I think it was Epic. It was a shoot off of one of the bigger companies.
Yeah.
But what I was always so impressed with is oftentimes they were not about the people who were going to hell. It was about the Cenobites.
Yes.
It was about how their lives and how they became Cenobites. And sometimes they completely, like one of the most beautiful ones that I remember vividly was about a guy who was being tortured by a female Cenobite. And throughout the course of the comic, he fell in love with her to the point where he realized that everything that she was doing was an act of love. And it really did play with, we'll talk about what they lose throughout the course of the franchise, was that they were angels to some, demons to others. And that for some people, this was what they wanted. It was like a choice because they wanted to experience everything that their body was capable of.
Yeah.
And so for some people, it was a pleasure and others, it was painful. And the comics delved into that way more than the movies ever did.
Sure. Yeah, I've been looking for those comics for a little while. I'm going to have to hit you up later. Maybe
Adam confirmed they are Epic. And the newer ones were Boom. They did a couple of reboots.
There's got to be some collections out there, huh? Some hardbound collections that I could buy for myself.
You can also find them on eBay relatively cheap because I bought all of the Nightbreed comics that were around the same time period a couple of years ago, and I bought like a set for like $40.
Nightbreed. That's great.
So Ryan, I'm sure that a lot of the people watching this are as interested as you are in tracking down these comic books. What interests me is how the hell did you get out of this can't stand up piss pants situation?
I eventually like sneaked my way to the back of the room, kind of went to the bathroom and did my drying techniques, but it was fine. No one caught me on that. But I mean, this was a hellish night. We'll have to talk about this another night because I still remember the lineup of all the fucking movies. Bad Taste was there. It was just so wild.
God. Wow.
Yeah, you're gonna have to recreate that at the Arrow when that reopens. That's Arrow reopening idea number 4,000 that we've had on the show.
Ryan's traumatic night.
Before we himself.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Before we get into the game, I want to bring in the voice of our producer, Adam Roberts. Adam, I believe we've got some people following along on Twitch this evening. Have there been any comments, any reactions, anything that you think we need to highlight before we get into the rules of the game?
Well, mostly Rebecca's overqualified. Graham is underqualified, and he's gonna lose this game. And
don't say that, guys. That means I'm going down. Don't call it that early.
I believe that. Rebecca's overqualified in most scenarios with me. So
people seem excited. There's no through line, but they're chatty, so expect chaos. When
got a lot of chatterboxes over there, huh, Adam?
Yep. Which is good.
That's it. That's the end of my puns. That's all I have. Those are the only two that I know the names of. Pinhead, Chatterbox, and the guy with CDs. Chatterer. See, that's the thing. I already. As always with this show, it's a good thing I am not at the GA table. I've forgotten what it's called. That's where I should be. The general admission is where I ought to be. The GM table. Okay, let's get into the rules of Screen Drafts. It is a serpentine style game. Our two guest GMs, Graham and Rebecca, are going to be alternating placing picks on the top 7 best of list from this eligibility pool this evening, which is the Hellraiser franchise. It's 10 movies, 7 spots. We'll see what makes it, and we'll see at what position. This is how the draft spots work. If you are drafter A, you make picks 7, 6, 4, and 2, which is 4 overall. If you are drafter B, you make picks 5, 3, and 1. So it's the difference between more picks overall or that number one pick at the top of the list. With franchises, people often think that the number one is a foregone conclusion. But if there's anything we've learned from having both Graham and Becca on the show, with those two, the number one is never a foregone conclusion. So I am very curious to see.
It's not, Clay.
I am very curious to see when the time comes how these spots get doled out. The way the draft positions are determined is via Ryan's trivia round. Ryan has prepared some trivia. Whoever wins between Rebecca and Graham is going to decide if they want to be drafter A, have more overall picks, or drafter B, and have that number one pick at the end of the night. These live shows that we do are not in canon with the regular show. So Graham and Becca are both just going to have one veto, no rollovers in or out of the live show. So both of those vetoes are essentially use them or lose them. None of the other rules apply that we usually talk about. There's not going to be any commissioner overrides. We are very clear on what the eligible titles are this evening. And Ryan and I discussed doing predictions for fun, but I forgot to do that. So we're not going to do predictions. Also, we're trying to keep this to a tight 2 hours out of respect for the programming of Panic Fest. So we're not going to do predictions, but maybe we'll briefly touch on the undrafted movies in our discard segment.
I'll still be excited to see how I did, because I did do it.
Ryan did remember. Okay. I mean, I have sort of my personal list in my head, but I'll just address that as we go along. And at the end of every pick, Adam is going to give us an update on how the viewers feel about that pick. So if you are in the Twitch chatting, definitely chat at Adam, and he's going to sort of aggregate an overall feeling. And you'll hear about that before we move on.
Clay,
to
I have
the
a
next
side prediction happening, which is how long this show will actually last.
Oh, look, I can be a taskmaster when needed, and I feel like Ryan is not going to be coy about using his patented Ryan Marker countdown.
Yeah,
and all I'm going to say is that hell is eternal, and so can be this episode of Screen Drafts.
But I'll also say something to appreciate about these movies is they are all move at a pretty decent clip. So I think we'll try to replicate that here this evening. Becca, Graham, do you guys have any questions before we move into the trivia?
Nope.
Do this
all
shit.
Right.
They
are ready to
How
rock
do we
and
buzz
roll.
in on the trivia? I should know this. I've done the online
We're
one.
just going to yell out. That's all. It's just yelling out.
But we got to wait for you to finish, right?
Exactly.
All right.
Which leads to my two rules of trivia. One's the Trebek rule, which Graham just stated, that I have to say the entire question before you guys answer. And the second is the Lord Bullington rule. If Rebecca answers incorrectly, we have to wait for Graham to answer before we go back to Rebecca. So it's essentially like a dual system. And that's about it. Clay, should I hop right in? Or
Ryan, if you are ready to do the trivia,
preambles?
let's hop right in. How many questions have you prepared this evening?
I got five. I got five.
And I think both of our GMs are experts.
That's what I mean. I wanted five because I just knew that they're going to be experts on this. So here we go. Number one. So again, this is really fast. Just yell it out as you know, because I know you're all going to know it all. Who composed the scores to the first two movies?
Christopher.
I know.
Just say it, Rebecca.
You can say
Christopher Young.
Young. God damn
Rebecca got it.
Christopher Young. I love those Christopher Young scores. He is.
I was like, do I have to wait for him to finish?
You do not.
Stop him. Stop him, Rebecca.
Stop me.
Ryan, you and I both know Christopher Young because he was a regular at Vidiot's Video Store back in the day. And
one of our favorite
character.
customers.
I enjoy him a lot, but his scores are kind of uniformly great. Like
it's
I always,
Yeah.
when you see his name pop up in the credits, you know you're in good hands.
Agreed. Yeah, one of our favorite customers as well. Okay, second question. Rebecca's up one. Who plays Pinhead in Hellraiser Revelations?
Stephen Smith.
Rebecca?
Is that right, Ryan?
It is
Stephen
not.
Smith Collins.
Graham, you already.
What?
Clay,
Graham,
how do
you broke the Bullingdon rule.
Oh no!
I don't know who played it in Revelation.
Come on, I said Stephen Smith. I mean,
You did. Okay, I'm going to give it to you, Graham.
I knew it was a Stephen and not a Stephen.
But when a person has three names, you better give them all three names. That's just a
true.
rule.
That's true.
The basketball commentator Stephen Smith.
Stephen Smith Collins is
That's who it was.
full name.
Stephen Smith Collins.
That's
Wait, Ryan,
right.
are you giving it to Graham even though he broke the rule?
Well, he did give two of the three names. Rebecca did kind of give it to
I
him.
do not know.
You could have taken Graham's answer and further stomped him, but that was
Oh, I could have.
You
that
could have
was
done that. You could have
that was
done
very
that.
gracious
You
of
could
you,
have.
Rebecca.
I'll get that
Okay,
one.
Okay.
tied up.
Tied up. Here we go. Name one of the changes made to the Cenobite Chatterer from Hellraiser 1 to Hellraiser 2. There were some significant changes made to the Cenobite Chatterer. One was apparently very angry, created an angry uproar from fans.
Is it a different actor?
No.
No?
This is the
I'm going to
design.
go with.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was going to say he becomes a torso, but that doesn't happen for a couple more down
That's correct.
the chain.
That's correct. Graham, you have one more. This is. I'm going to give you a hint. This is the design of the character. This is the design of the Chatterer.
He no longer has eyes.
No, but so close. No, so close. Rebecca.
He no longer has a nose.
No.
No, he
Graham.
now has eyes. He has eyes now.
Oh, that was so frustrating.
Around 4 or 5, he does become a torso. Like
It's
literally,
true.
he loses
Yeah.
the entire
He
lower half
does.
of his body.
Really, they actually
Oh,
had
man.
eyes, a nose, and ears, and I guess people freaked the fuck out when that happened, which is very funny to me.
But Pinhead gets sexier because he shows midriff, like mid 90s belly button. Like he goes
does,
low cut
yeah.
by like 4 or 5.
He turns into a 90s diva. Okay, here we go. What was the original title that they were going to give the first Hellraiser?
Sadomasochist
Hellbound
from
Heart.
hell.
Close, Rebecca, but no.
And Graham said something that sounded entirely different, although they were
Yes.
speaking over each other.
I'm sure I wasn't right.
Rebecca, I'll give you one more. But you're very close.
Ooh.
5, 4,
Oh no.
3.
Sadomasochist and in hell.
No, so close. Sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave.
Oh shit.
Ah.
And apparently Roger Corman thought that was a little too cheesy, which I just find really funny.
You can only get away with a title
Classy
like
guy.
There's titles too deep.
you can't get away with a Giallo-y title like that if the movie is in English.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Very, very true. Okay, last question. So what's the score here? Is it Graham 2, Rebecca 1? I can't remember.
Graham's got
Wait,
2, Rebecca has
think
1.
I
Because
have
the last
one.
one, nobody got a point, right?
That's right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Graham's up 1. I don't know what happens. We'll have to flip a coin if
Although
we,
Graham is lagging. Graham, can you hear us audio-wise in real time here?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. You're
I
there.
can hear you now.
Yeah, you're just frozen in a state of
I can hear you. Hello.
turmoil.
Good.
Yeah, you're good. You're
Okay.
good. Okay, here we go. Andrew Robinson.
I'm in a horrible limbo. Pinhead's holding me hostage.
Wait, what?
I think he said
Losing him.
Pinhead is holding him hostage.
Are you there now, Graham? Uh-oh. Graham has fallen off the map.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Okay.
I'm
You're there.
here.
Okay.
Graham,
no.
Graham got
Oh,
the
I'm
lead, and
here.
now he's trying to shut it all
I'm
down.
here.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
This is not going to help you, Graham, in trivia.
we
okay.
we have
here.
to push forward, Ryan. What's
Yeah.
the last question here?
All right, here we go.
If it ties, I'll come up with something.
Andrew Robinson in the first film, the dad of the first film, also played a serial killer in what famous franchise?
Stepfather?
Which one?
No.
Say it again.
He said the stepfather.
I said the
No,
stepfather?
not Stepfather.
No.
This is not a horror franchise.
No, he was in Dirty Harry.
That's right, Rebecca McKendry.
Wow. Oh no.
That was my first win. He walked in because it had been a long time since I'd seen Hellraiser when I was rewatching it, and he walks in. Actually,
You're
whenever I see him, I'm like, it's the Scorpio Killer.
Yeah. Graham, you should know he's also in Deep Space Nine.
Oh,
if
I know
memory
he's a Deep
serves.
Space Nine. He's
Yeah.
Garrick.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Not
right.
the only Deep Space Nine Hellraiser connection.
So that's
Oh,
2-2, Clay.
there's
What do you
a
want to
lot.
do here?
It's 2-2. Okay, I'll have my tiebreaker question.
Oh, great.
That I'm just going to come up with now. Rebecca, so I just said that the Scorpio killer who played Garrick is not the only Deep Space Nine and Hellraiser connection. Graham is already the lead character in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, is played by Terry Farrell. What is her character name on Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
Jadzia Dax.
Oh
Graham
man,
screamed
I
it.
was sitting here going, wait, was Lance Henriksen? He's got to be in some. Okay.
I literally,
Jadzia Dax.
right before we started recording this, my wife is a huge Star Trek fan, and I was watching Hellraiser 3 as I was kind of getting ready, and I, for the first time ever, realized that was Jadzia Dax in Hellraiser 3, and I said, look, here's an excuse for you to watch Hellraiser 3 with me. And she said, this is literally the only way that you would ever get me to watch that movie with you.
Graham, congratulations, I guess, in more ways than one. You won the trivia
Wow.
and you convinced your wife to watch Hellraiser 3.
All right.
Both impressive victories there.
That
So,
was
Graham,
tense. That was a tense.
that was tense. Graham, you have to make the decision. Do you want to draft first and have more picks, or draft second and have the number one pick at the top of the list?
The number 2 pick is extremely important to me in this draft, so I would like more picks.
Okay.
All right, Graham is going for that number.
Oh God,
2.
you're gonna do something crazy. You're gonna pull like a Freddy versus Jason, aren't you? You're
I
gonna
don't
do it.
know. I don't know.
You never
I don't know what I'm gonna do, Becca.
Oh, Graham.
And of course, we're going to take an intermission after pick number 4 before we get into the top 3. Here is how the online game works. When I prompt our GMs, they are going to direct message me their picks. I will announce them. They will discuss them. How the vetoes work is this way. If you want to veto something the other person plays, either because you think it doesn't belong on this list of 7, or you want to try and move it higher up the list, you're just going to jump in and shout. We're shouting out our vetoes. If you know that you are going to try and move it up the list, feel free to jump right in as soon as it's announced and say veto, 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 because that means we'll probably be talking about it in full later on. If you are unconvinced, or you're going to try and keep it off the list, let the person who played it give their spiel before coming in with that veto. And again, as I said, 1 veto apiece, and they evaporate at the end of the game, so there's no incentive to hang on to them. Okay, here we go. Adam, anything? Let's do a check-in. A Twitch check-in before we get into our first pick. Graham, when you are prepared with that, you can send it right on over. Adam, what is the temperature over on the Twitch? Are they excited? Are they nervous? What's the vibe over there?
Well, Graham really put everyone through the ringer during the trivia, and they said, Graham, how do you fail on the score question, but you know who the hell was in Revelations? And that was pretty much everyone's vibe during the entire trivia is, what the hell is happening here?
Like, what's wrong with Graham's brain?
Tell them to get ready for a ride tonight.
Oh God, y'all.
They are very excited, I think. So I think you're going to break some hearts tonight is what I think is going to happen, because there's some super fans in here. They were beating you all to those questions pretty quick.
Wow.
We should have had some sort of a special prize for the listeners if they won the trivia, but we don't. We didn't think of that. Nope. Okay, not to break any more hearts, dangling the false promise of a prize.
Of a gift.
Graham has sent me his pick at number 7, and we're just going to get into it. Okay, here we go. The people on Twitch were asking how the hell Graham knew things about the movie Hellraiser Revelations, and it's because it's his pick at number 7, Hellraiser Revelations.
Guys.
Yes. So, I'm a fan of this movie. I fully understand people's complaints about it. I think that Pinhead was sadly miscast. He's just not. He's not the right Pinhead. I think that what I love about this movie is that, so many of the movies that we're going to be talking about tonight were not originally written to be Hellraiser movies. So many of them are spec scripts that were then reworked and retooled to become Hellraiser movies, and they became awesome Hellraiser movies. This is one of the few that was intended as a Hellraiser film, and when you watch it, what I love is that it shares the DNA with the original in terms of it being about weird familial sex relationships, about familial mistrust. It's a movie that's ultimately about it shares that idea of somebody wearing someone else's skin. All of these things that I think make the original film so special, that I just really appreciate that this movie, which was made in 3 weeks. So, I mean, this was a movie that was very clearly and straightforwardly made to be simply I think they're called an ash can film, just something purely to retain the rights of a franchise. And that's what Revelations was. And I just love the idea of a movie made. The budget for this film was $300,000, right? This is made for very little money in a very short period of time. And I think that they made a pretty good Hellraiser movie. Pinhead's casting, look, Doug Bradley turned it down because understandably the movie was going to be made in 3 weeks, and he didn't even have time to really read the script, and he wasn't going to be a part of it. Totally get it. I think Stephen Smith Collins was miscast, which I can also understand because they had to, I'm sure, cast this thing in a few days. But I love the story of this movie getting made. I love the fact that it got made at all. And I love that despite the fact that it was being made for so cheap and so quickly, that they actually told a true blue original Hellraiser tale. So Hellraiser Revelations is way better than people give it credit for. And that's why I'm putting it at number 7.
Rebecca, Graham seems impressed that this movie got made. Do you share that feeling? Do you think this ought to be on this list at number 7?
I don't give out participation awards. So fuck no, I don't think this movie should be on the list. Oh my God, this movie is literally like a family drama. And then Pinhead stands in the kitchen and goes, "Roar, roar." And that's like it. That's it. That's like his role in the movie. Oh God, this is frustrating because see, now my role becomes I could veto this because I truly do not believe Revelations has any place on this list. But knowing Graham, he's just going to play it higher to prove a point.
No. Look, I'm going to tell you totally honestly right now. If you veto this right now, this movie won't reappear on this list. I believe this deserves to be at number 7. But it shouldn't be any higher. That's why I played it here. I have other movies that could go here. So play those at your own risk.
Okay.
So then the other strategic question there, Rebecca, is, I think that Graham doesn't tell tales out of school on this show generally. Yeah. He's very reliable. The thing he may be doing is trying to strip you of that veto because he has something
this was
interesting
not
planned for higher up the list.
This was not played as a pull a veto. I'm sure 2 things can be true at once, Graham. You can think this movie belongs on this list and expect it to get vetoed. All right.
I'm
Rebecca, the choice is yours. Are you going to use your 1 veto on the first pick here, Hellraiser Revelations?
I am not. Mm-hmm. It's a trap.
Interesting.
All right. No traps, but you can do it.
I am inclined to say, you know what? Number 7, it's low enough I can let it slide. Because though I had other films in number 7, I'm going to say that this low, they're negligibly better. And so the films that I would have seen here, it was still, I will say, barely above a participation award. Like the particular film that I was putting here was another one where I was like, well, I thought they tried really hard to do something interesting. And so that said, I'm going to let it roll.
Sure.
All right. Rebecca's going to let it roll.
Very gracious of you.
She thinks the Graham doth protest too much, and maybe there is a surprise in
Graham.
Future. I did not get around to Revelations in my prep. Ryan, did you put eyes on this movie?
I haven't either, but I am looking right now on Clive Barker's Twitter feed about it, which is very funny. He wrote, "I want to put on record that this movie out there using the word Hellraiser is no fucking child of mine. I have nothing to do with the fucking thing. If they claim it's from the mind of Clive Barker, it's a lie. It's not even from my butthole." That's on his Twitter feed.
Well, Ryan, I think we just came up with a new screen draft segment that is going to be on every episode, regardless of the topic, is we search Clive Barker's Twitter to see if we can find his thoughts. Okay, unvetoed and on the list at number 7, Hellraiser Revelations. Producer Adam.
How'd they like that?
What does Twitch think about that pick at number 7?
Everybody saw through Graham's trying to get her to use her veto.
It wasn't trying to get a veto out of it. I swear.
They claim that Graham is playing 3D chess, and this is that was his move. But yeah, they were all team don't use it. So you did the right thing, Rebecca.
Team don't use it. Hey, there you go,
team don't use
Rebecca.
it. Okay.
Graham's no Billy Ray. He's not a veto drawer.
But he does always have like a moment of chaos. Like he definitely has these little slivers of Agent of Chaos in there.
He's Graham Stepper.
I played with Graham enough to know that he definitely is not afraid to pull out the weird ones when it gets to like 1 or 2. And that's where I'm going to try to preserve it, is 1 or 2.
And if there's anybody I know of all of my friends who is most likely to have a 3D chessboard in their home, it is Graham Skipper. So he may be.
I've looked
he
online.
may have been practicing that 3D chess.
I've looked online for one.
What is the name of the chess in Star Trek that's got the 3 different levels? I can't remember either.
Yeah.
Somebody put it in the Twitch feed.
All right. They used to have one of those in my the shopping mall I went to as a kid. There was a games store, and they always had one of those in the display window. But I didn't have $500 when I was 11. Okay. Also, I can't play chess. It would have been a pointless thing for me to buy. Okay. Number 7, Hellraiser Revelations. Graham also has the number 6 pick. And here we go. He's already sent it when we were all having our debate over if Graham was trying to fool everybody. He said, "I've had enough of this," and just sent his pick and sat back and waited for us to shut up. Okay. I've got it. At number 6, Graham has selected. There was 1 year. Now, Graham, correct me if I get this trivia wrong. There was a year where 2 Hellraiser movies were made back to back.
Yep.
Wow.
And this is one of those, right, Graham?
That's correct.
Okay. Here we go. At number 6, Graham has selected from 2005, Hellraiser Deader.
Hellraiser Deader. I like this movie quite a lot, actually. This was one of the movies that was a spec script. That was actually, let me get my notes out. That was actually
Neil Marshall Stevens and
Neil
Tim
Marshall
Gay.
Stevens. Yep, there you go. The authors of the remake of 13 Ghosts, which I'm also a big fan of. It was originally a script by them that then got reworked into being a Hellraiser script. I think it actually works really well as a Hellraiser script. It's basically about a reporter played by Carrie Wurr, who is going to investigate a cult who has been caught on video executing somebody, and then that person that was just executed on camera then immediately rises from the dead. And they are called the dead. They call themselves the Deaders. And basically, Carrie Wurr goes to investigate what's going on with this cult, and discovers that, of course, the Cenobites and the puzzle box are at the heart of the mystery surrounding how these cult members are able to come back to life. I like this movie a lot. This movie is it's very dark. It's very super atmospheric. I think it's really well made, directed by Rick Boda. It was so the Weinsteins basically said, "We want you to make a movie in the style of like Pulse and The Ring." These Japanese horror movies that were super popular at the time. And when you have that in mind, as you watch this movie, you can 100% see that influence. And I think they actually do a really good job of it. I think this movie is actually scary. I think that this movie It makes me super uncomfortable. It's, with the exception of maybe one other movie, I think the grossest of the Hellraiser movies. And I really like this film. And, I think that there's some other ones where, the story is maybe a bit tighter and works a little bit better, but I've always liked Deader. It's unfortunately very difficult to find. It's weird that all the other Hellraiser films are released on Blu-ray, but this one weirdly is not. And I do not understand why. Becca might have more insight into that, into the politics of whatever makes that happen. But yeah, Hellraiser Deader at number 6. I think it's a good spot for it. That's it.
All right. And Graham touched on something that I found watching a lot of these movies is a good way to make the audience uncomfortable these days right off the bat is opening a movie with the big old Weinstein name and then cruising straight into it. You get your scares before the movie's even begun. Rebecca, Hellraiser Deader at number 6. How do you feel about this?
This is actually where I had it. So I'm great with this. I've talked about this on my own podcast. I like Deader. I don't think it's a great Hellraiser movie. Pinhead feels very much kind of just, thumbed in there, not really cohesive. But the whole concept of the cult and coming back from the dead and then having the wounds and discovering that you're slowly dying, the setting of Bucharest, the setting, there's a club on the subway that I'm like, that club looks pretty badass. There's a lot going on in this movie that I like. I can see why they thought that it would make a good Hellraiser movie because it really does feel kind of Harry D'Amorish, which is Clive Barker's detective that reappears throughout a lot of his stuff. It does have this very kind of mid-2000s neo-noir thing going on where it feels very guttural. It feels almost torture porny. You can tell that he's kind of touching on notes of that as well. So as a whole, I don't have much against this one. Again, it's not, as far as like Pinhead and mythology, it's not great because it does not use the Hellraiser mythology for shit. It's just kind of a very much like a beeline. But that said, I like this movie as just a movie.
I am intrigued by the sort of parallel track that Hellraiser has with the John McClane Die Hard movies, where they're just taking spec scripts and books that have nothing to do with the main character and seeing where they can fit these characters into varying degrees of success. I also didn't see this one. I mean, I'm going to become a broken record until we get higher up the list. I'm sure I've seen the first 5 Hellraiser movies. So that is my experience. I've seen half of them. So I assume I will have something to say about most of the picks going forward. But we'll see. Ryan, have you seen, I haven't heard the name Carrie Werr in a long ass time. Have you seen Carrie Werr in Hellraiser Deader?
No, I haven't. But I have to say, like, as much as you guys are telling me that this is kind of a good movie, that is a terrible title.
Very much so.
It's a really bad title.
And it's a really bad cover too. I mean, it's like, what did they do here? The marketing of this movie, they could have come up with a better title. Like Hellraiser Romania would have even been better.
Sure.
I don't know.
Hellraiser goes to Romania.
That also sounds like a great reality show that I would love to watch.
Exactly.
In it, they use the name Deader because that's what the cult calls themselves. After they die and then come back, they call themselves the Deaders, but it does not work. It's just a weird title.
Man, even if you called it Hellraiser The Deaders, that would
that would have been a little bit cooler.
I do like the idea of him being in sort of the Eastern Bloc because you get sort of Dracula-y type vibes from the first movie. So there's something there. Again, I haven't seen this movie, so I cannot speak to it any further.
Well, in it, one of the things that they play with is that the leader of this cult is passed down. Like he's legacy from the toy maker, Lamarchand. Because they even say like, you should have stayed a toy maker or something like that. But this box has been in his family and kind of come down through the generations.
I like that toy maker shit. That's what's fun to me. Adam, how is Twitch feeling about Hellraiser Deader at number 6? And do they have any good suggestions for alternate titles?
No alternate titles yet. Well, there's Pinhead's European Vacation, actually.
Okay.
There's that. That's the only title I've gotten in here, but they were already talking about how awkward that title is. But there is an update. Becca, it is Tridimensional Chess from Star Trek.
Thank you.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, but people generally are okay with this pick. We all thought it was going to be number 7. So
I see.
All right. So it was Graham and Becca's 6. A lot of people out there thought it was going to be number 7. So far, not straying too far from the coalescing conventional wisdom. All right, there we go at number 6.
First 2 on
Hellraiser Deader. So Graham got on at 7, Hellraiser Revelations, and number 6, Hellraiser Deader. And we are moving on over to Dr. Becca McKendry from the Colors of the Dark podcast for the first pick in the draft at number 5.
I numbered it, stupid. Sorry. That should say 5.
Yes, but I was confused for a second, but I did figure it out. But hold on, let me just, let's see, gotta write down a Roman numeral. Okay, here we go. This is, if you ever listen to the show and wondering what I'm doing when I'm mumbling to myself, I have just these note cards that I just write the things on to keep track of it for myself. And I find it very important to write down the whole title before I announce anything. That's just part of my process. But at number here, we'll do this. This will be a fun. The live show, we could have just had you guys make cards.
No, we should have made notes.
I should have done that.
And think about that. I mean, maybe for the top of the show. Okay. At number 5, Rebecca McKendry has selected the one where they go to space, Hellraiser 4 Bloodline.
I'm going to use my veto on this, Clay.
Oh! Right in with the veto.
Son of a. Okay.
Well, that means it's going higher, though, doesn't it?
Okay.
Rebecca still retains her veto, but I can't imagine. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Promptly vetoed. Rebecca selected Hellraiser 4, so we will see if that comes up higher up on the list.
And
knowing Graham,
that should be higher. So Graham's got his supporter here.
Yes.
Graham's got some support on
Finger on the pulse.
I just sent another.
Knowing Graham's affinity for horror series, taking trips outside of the orbit, outside of the atmosphere of Earth. I assume this will come back up. Okay, here we go. I've got Rebecca's replacement at number. Let's just try to get the title exactly right. Okay, there we go. Let me write this down. Okay. At number 5, Rebecca played Hellraiser 4, got it vetoed. Her replacement, I always love when this happens. At number 5, the 5th film in the Hellraiser franchise, Scott Derrickson's Hellraiser Inferno.
Okay, so I have a crazy affection for Inferno. This is one that I felt like didn't get enough love, but I do love Inferno. This one is from 2000. This is another one of the neo-noir ones where Craig Sheffer, who most people know from Nightbreed, but seriously, y'all, Turbulence 3 is like his best work. Yes. But fine, thus I digress. So in Hellraiser Inferno, he plays this incredibly and flawed police detective. Like, dude has so much shit going on. But he starts finding these crazy crime scenes with the box at them and all of these other kind of pinhead moments. And he starts having all of these hallucinations simultaneously. And then he realizes that these crime scenes are not exactly what they are cracked up to be. This one is one of the most gruesome, I will say. Like, this one gets pretty gory, and it definitely has an interesting detective story going on. My big complaint with it is that Craig Sheffer is a little too flawed. Like, honestly, he's just such a douchey character.
He's like Bad Lieutenant. He is. He's insane.
It's like following Bad Lieutenant for a movie, trying to cheer him on and hope that he solves the crime when in actuality you're like, dude, Pinhead just needs to come take you. And he does. So there, eventually he encounters them. But this is kind of horror legacy in the degree that this is Scott Derrickson. And Scott Derrickson is going to go on to do absolutely, absolutely amazing stuff. I also like this one because it really does start playing around with other things with the box. Gary Tunnicliffe really does kind of pull out the stops on this one with how the box is transforming. And my favorite element of this one, it brings in the engineer. Now, this is at the top, I mentioned the whole politics of hell. The politics of hell rarely make it into the latter inclusions in the franchise because everybody just wants Pinhead and ripping limbs off and face removal and stuff like that. But in Hell, it's supposed to be that Leviathan controls Hell. He's in charge of everything, which we learn about him in part 2. But that the engineer is the one designing kind of how the bodies are transformed. And so the fact that the engineer kind of becomes a mob boss in this, I love. I think it's just a smart way to kind of bleed in the politics that we see in some of the actual Hellraiser mythos into an actually really fascinating movie from the time period.
Yeah, I watched this. This was the last one I watched. I watched this last night, and I enjoyed this. It has the dialogue kind of uniformly is a little bit better than some of the other movies. The side characters are all very colorful and specific, and you can really start to feel the Scott Derrickson. I don't want to start throwing out words like a tour. I like Scott Derrickson's work a lot, but the back half of the movie when he starts going through all of like the dreamscape rooms and the memories and all of that stuff, you really start to feel like he turns around and all of a sudden it's snowing in the hallway and stuff like that. Like, okay, I can see how this guy ended up doing Doctor Strange. Like you can see what he's interested in there visually, getting inside of the character's head. And I'll say any movie where sweet old Catherine Houston just gets ruined with a shotgun is, that's memorable. That's going to stick with you.
When we're talking about the flashbacks, I just rewatched this one 2 nights ago. And there's this moment where Pinhead comes and he's like, I have to show you this. It's the most important moment of your life. And then it flashes back to his childhood. And literally the only thing that happens is his mother makes him chocolate chip cookies. And she goes, I made your favorite cookies, chocolate chip. And then he goes to a completely different time zone. And I'm like, that's what you had to show him, Pinhead? Okay, we can go there.
And I love in movies when a character goes, I made this, it's your favorite. No, people don't need to be told what their favorite dish is. That's entirely for our benefit.
He forgot it. And Pinhead, it was really crucial that Pinhead bring that memory back.
Look, James Remar's fun in this movie too. Graham, how do you feel about Inferno at number 5?
I'm just saying that, one of the tools that Pinhead has to provide pleasure is chocolate chip cookies. Okay. Pleasure and pain. All right. I'm a big fan of this movie. This is what I had in number 5.
Look at that.
I'm thrilled for it to be here. This movie is so stylish and also really kind of for the first time in this franchise. I don't know. It hits me in a more personal way, like in terms of the characters. I'm watching Craig Sheffer's arc in this. I somehow weirdly care about him. Even though like he's a total scumbag, I'm really invested. I think this movie's like super sweaty and gross and hot. It reminds me a lot of like Angel Heart, of that sort of vibe. I'm a big fan of this movie. I think that, and I think sort of my point of trying to do this draft is that I want to tell people just because it's one of the Hellraiser movies that's past like number 2 doesn't mean that it's a piece of garbage. So many people when we announced this were like, oh, sorry, just gonna like be fighting over which one's the worst one. And like, they're not bad. Like these movies are all totally worthwhile. They're stylishly made. I think this is an awesome debut for Scott Derrickson. And I think that as far as movies that had to be shoehorned into being a Hellraiser film, I think that this one, the key fits the lock. And I think that it works. So big fan. Good placement.
Ryan, how do you feel about the 7 of the Hellraiser franchise, Hellraiser Inferno?
I'm like you, like all of you guys. I really enjoyed this. I watched this last night for the first time, and I just loved how you it's a Hellraiser movie, but the fact that like Pinhead doesn't show up for so long kind of really throws you as a viewer. You're waiting for it's very unpredictable, and with the exception of the puzzle box, there's sort of you just kind of go down this. It's a very Lynchian type of movie. It's got a lot of just interesting visuals and I don't know, it was just a perfect midnight movie for me last night. So I was wildly surprised by it. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Craig Sheffer. I really liked his partner in this, Nick Turturro, too. I thought he actually gave a really great performance. That's the other thing, is that the performances in this one were really elevated, even compared to like the best of the series. I felt like the script was a little bit better. The acting was a little bit better. You're totally right, Clay. James Remar, who I always love in everything, is really quite good in this. So yeah, I'm really, this was actually my number 4. So I'm glad it's right around here. So yeah, it's good.
Should have known that James Remar was up to no good when he knew what the like fancy name for the puzzle box was.
Right. It kind of gave him away. It's true.
What is that? It's the lamentate
the Le Marchand configuration.
Lament configuration.
The lament configuration. Yeah. There you go. I love when they make the one in space. We'll see if we talk about that. That movie. Okay. Vetoed at number 5, Hellraiser Bloodlines. Ended up with Hellraiser Inferno.
Gotta say,
Adam.
too, great title. This is a great title. Hellraiser Inferno. Fuck yeah, I'm down. Yeah, it's great.
I'm surprised it took them that long to get to the Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, right.
Allusions. Adam, how do people feel about the turn of events there at number 5?
It seems that people are pretty okay with it. There's a lot of cookie talk happening right now.
As there should be.
There's they said the cookies are his soul and the chocolate chips are his suffering. And the recipe is legendary even in hell, which I do like all these things. But yeah, by and large, I think people are. How
do the listeners feel about being characterized as Valley Girls by Graham?
Well, I don't know.
I was not characterizing our listeners as that. I was characterizing some people on Twitter as that.
Some discreet individuals on Twitter.
Well, there's a lot of Graham love in here tonight. They picture Graham, even though they can fully see Graham. They picture him in a leather swivel chair in his lair at the base of a volcano as he schemes his plans through the Hellraiser pics.
Yeah,
that's why he's got the lights dim, because he's in a volcano lair, of course.
Exactly.
Graham has done a good job of cultivating the mystique around himself in the Zoom age. Because you've created a little rated R bar in your office there.
This is I function best in low neon light.
There you go. All right, there you go. We got one more pick before the intermission. Graham, we are back over to you for your pick at number 4. Look, hey, now we're getting into. Of the 5 movies that I watched, I got to assume they're all going to be the ones they're all pretty good. They're got to be all the ones we talked about. I'm going to be shocked, but I am here to be shocked. That is my function this evening. So Graham, you have the pick at number 4.
A veto.
I know you do.
Becca does have a veto. That is true.
I know you do.
Graham, you sent all your previous picks without any hemming and hawing, but you're looking like you're kind of making a decision right now.
I am. Yeah, I'm between 2 movies. And I think, I gotta do this.
Okay.
I'm gonna do this.
Okay. Here we go. At number 4, unless it's vetoed, this will be the last pick before we take our quick intermission here after we discuss it. Graham has selected a movie that I actually enjoyed a lot, and maybe my opinion on this movie runs counter. Apparently it does to the conventional wisdom, but I'm looking forward to talking about it. At number 4, it was the source of my off the dome bonus trivia question. Jazita Dax herself in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
Yeah, Hellraiser 3. This movie is in a franchise that is built of odd ducks. I consider this to be the oddest duck of the franchise. This one basically takes Pinhead and tries to turn him into Freddy Krueger, with in sort of mixed results. But I find it wholly fascinating and wholly entertaining. This movie's pretty bonkers. This movie is, I just love the setup that for the first half of this movie, Pinhead is stuck literally in a pillar. He's just a talking head.
Obelisk.
He's an obelisk. Yes. Excuse me. I'm sorry. And it does spin, But I love the audacity of that. I love how weird this movie is. I love how, especially following Hellraiser 2, that this movie would be the natural follow-up to it is just so silly to me, which is why I love it. I love that we get Pinhead with quips. I love that we get Pinhead, standing in front of a stained glass window with it exploding behind him. Like, what a great iconic shot. I love that we have a CD Cenobite. We have a video camera Cenobite. This is like the beginning of that idea of like, hey, just think of whatever sort of thing you can think of and we'll turn it into a Cenobite. Why is there not a chocolate chip cookie Cenobite? Why is there not a I don't know, a Billy Ray Bruton Cenobite? There could be any kind of Cenobite.
You're writing Gremlins 2 right now.
Exactly. And I feel like this movie has that vibe to it. It has that energy. And so I enjoy it. I like it a lot. And but I don't think it should go any higher than number 4. So that's why I played it here.
This is maybe my second favorite of all of them. I really enjoyed all the stuff that Graham was talking about. It is interesting how much influence you can see from the Nightmare movies, even with like the second movie, there's an asylum with like a girl with special powers. And then in this one, it's more of a Freddy, like you said, for stylistic Freddy Krueger thing. And then the last 25 minutes of this movie, I like the first part, everything you were saying, all of the kooky stuff and totally changing Pinhead and trying to turn him into one of these like wisecracking horror icons. And I like Terry Farrell. I like the relationship with her and the kind of like wayward club girl. I think that's really sweet at times and really makes you invest in the two of them. But the last 20 minutes when the Cenobites are just like laying siege on the main street and blowing shit up and all that, like, oh, this is awesome. Fun. I like this. They kill some cops. They blow up a church. Like, yeah, this is all great. And the other thing, since we're tying Star Trek into this, that's the theme tonight. When I saw the Cenobite with the camera in his face, I was like, this is some Borg shit. And then realizing when the first Hellraiser came out, I have to imagine there was some sort of inspiration loop that the Borg were sort of inspired by the Cenobites, and then the Cenobites were then inspired by the Borg. It feels that way to me. I have no evidence for that, but I feel it in my soul. Rebecca,
can you imagine a crossover where a Borg is turned into a Cenobite?
There's got to be a comic book. They crossed over Star Trek with everything in comic books.
Okay, you got to write that comic book.
I'll see who I can sell that to. There's going to be some rights clearances. We didn't even talk about rights yet, but the Hellraiser rights, I could write a whole book on. They are just completely crazy, divided up even by Cenobite. Like certain Cenobites only go with the movie rights, certain ones go with the TV, certain ones are held by Clive Barker's company. And so each one of the Cenobites has their kind of own rights issue therein. So yeah, it's a real messy franchise in that regard. But yeah. So yeah, are you sold, Rebecca? Did Graham sell you on Hellraiser 3 at number 4? So I admittedly was going to play this one a lot higher. Because this one, I have to say, it's my personal fave of the franchise. It's not what I'm going to consider to be like the best Hellraiser movie.
Rebecca, but this is my.
I don't want to put it here. I'm scared if I veto and try to bump it higher, he's going to pull out one of the ones that I'm like, he's. I
don't have any more vetoes, and all I'm going to say is that I'm in this with you. I might have weird opinions, but I'm not trying to fuck over, Pinhead here. I've got the franchise's best interests at heart.
You know what? I'm going to let this roll because I was only going to play it. I was going to put it at 3. So okay. I'm gonna accept this and say, okay, you know what? Because I think I know where Graham's going with 3. I hope so. I'm gonna let it roll. 3 is my absolute personal favorite of the franchise. This one hit me. It came out when I was in middle school. It was one that I saw straight away. And it was everything that I wanted to be as an adult. It was just this cool industrial club. It was heavy metal with goth overtones, the Boiler Room, run by that really sexy guy who smokes a lot during sex, JT Monroe, I think his name was. He was like total douchebag, but like hot douchebags. So yeah, he had good boots. But yeah, this one, I just love this one so much. It was, I was such a metalhead at this time period, even all through high school. I was really into industrial. And I still always say that this movie was part of what kicked it off, because it did have such an awesome soundtrack. For some reason, though, the club chose to play Soup Dragons, not industrial, but we'll go with it. And Soup Dragons kind of became the soundtrack of the movie, which was weird. But yeah, this one just, it hit. And I loved, excuse me, how kind of silly it almost got, how it infused the club, how at the end it blew up the world much bigger than any of the other movies, where Pinhead and his Cenobites are just fucking going through and tearing shit apart. I loved this so much. So yeah.
I love they go to this they're like, we're going to the boiler room. It's this like den of evil and blah, and they go in and there's this big sign, it's like boiler room bar and grill. I found that the whole boiler room situation was very amusing to me, that there's like three parts, and one is like a fine dining establishment, and then one
you
is
gotta have, it's like boiler room black.
New York hanging out.
Yeah. And then he's got his like sexy club up top, and yeah.
And his apartment where he keeps an obelisk.
This one had so many one-liners as well, coming from Pinhead, coming from even like, I can dream now, Roxy. I can dream. And, you know, it just had all of these like fucking great one-liners to it as well. It hit well for me. This is one that I rewatch a lot.
I think it's one that I'll probably rewatch. And then even further going into the Nightmare on Elm Street influence, it ends with a bespoke theme song that works the title of the film into it.
Yep.
I will also say the ending of this pulled something from the comic books, which is the idea that the box can also become part of architecture. And this was one of the first ones that did this. So in the comic books, one of the actual standalone comic books was about a modern day office designer who decides to make the office into a lament configuration. So depending on how you walk through the building, you can actually open up the box. And that becomes the ending to part 3. I wish they had kept that shit going.
Interesting. Ryan, we all seem to really enjoy Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. How are you feeling about this pick at number 4?
I am with all of you. Pinhead in New York. It was the kind of movie that I was waiting for. It's just perfect. I think that this is a really, really fucking fun movie. I mean, I think it's weird because I remember reading that it veers from the tones of the first two, which it does. However, I will also say that it sort of elaborates on a lot of the things from the first. I mean, you sort of, figuring out who Pinhead is, that whole, like, I like all that aspect. I like the war stuff. I just, there were certain things about this movie that were very, very different from what had come previous. And it feels like, it definitely feels like an American like remake of Hellraiser to some extent. But again, I just sort of dug that. I liked that it wasn't as gory as the first two. I just think tonally speaking, it's a little, even though it's far more destructive than the first two, it just has a new tone, and that's what I kind of appreciated about it.
I feel like of all the Hellraiser movies, this is the best slumber party movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is the one I wish I would have seen that night. This would have been a fucking blast with my buds.
Yeah, I don't do slumber parties anymore. Now that I'm in my early 30s, those are the bygone days of my late 20s. But I do wish I'd watched this movie with people. I was watching it by myself and having a great time, and I was like, I bet this would be a lot of fun with a group.
Yeah.
Barbie Cenobite and the CD. Yeah, all that's great. The new Cenobites are fantastic.
I thought he was just going to have CDs sticking out of his head. He's like flinging them like a weapon. Oh, man, this is good stuff. This doesn't get better than this. Adam, how is Twitch feeling about our pick taking us into the intermission here, Hellraiser 3?
They must love this.
Well, there's a lot of people talking very positively, but there's a couple people. I forgot that there was some chatter that they thought that Graham was going to protect this list from 3, and then he played it, which is a shock.
Protect it from 3?
Or from 4, sorry.
It.
From number 4, but they thought that Becca was going to play this higher. A couple people think that it should have been number 3, but I think people generally like Pinhead Takes Manhattan at this spot. But there's a lot of positive conversation here.
Good. Good.
All right. I love a generally positive vibe. So everybody's on board.
They don't hate you yet.
Oh, but Becca, there is a note for you that you have to play Bloodlines next, because if you don't, Graham will put that at number 1.
Oh, I am well aware. I have notes of strategy going on here, guys, like some football play level shit.
That's incredible.
All right, Rebecca's well prepared with her notes, and
there's her playbook.
I think we're ready to take an intermission. Is everybody ready to? Hey,
I gotta go yell at some kids before y'all have to hear my mom voice again. Because on the last one, I had to get full mom voice. So this one,
we did have the pleasure of getting a glimpse inside of Rebecca's parenting style the last time she was on. So that's if you want to find out, you can listen back to.
So help me God, I will make you open this puzzle box.
I will end all of you.
For something that is supposed to be very, intricate and special and unique, every person certainly seems to have no problem.
They just rub it for 3 seconds and the fucking thing.
How do they all know that they have to like caress it with their thumb?
Well,
it is not a puzzle box.
Oh. Graham, stop! Graham, no!
It's always either they know what they're doing and they're curious, which I get. It's right. Like, if you're standing there holding a shroom, do you cross that line? Or they don't know what they're doing and they're just like doop doop doop, and then
or like she so eloquently says in Hellraiser Revelations, you have to want it to open.
Ooh.
When we discuss judgment, which I'm assuming we may much later, we'll find out. But that one I think does some interesting stuff with the idea of the opening, or like in Deader, where they have to convince someone else to open it. That becomes part of it, is they have to tantalize her to open it enough that she does it. So why you open the puzzle box is always fascinating. But in the original mythos, it was always by your own hand because you were so fucking curious about what's going to happen.
All right. Well, I'm very curious about what is going to happen in the top 3 picks. But to get there, first we have to take our intermission. Adam, that's going to be whether we're gonna take a 5. Is that what we're doing? All right, Adam just nodded affirmative. We're going to take 5, but first I'm going to tell you what the list looks like right now. Here, Screen Drafts, Hellraiser Draft with Dr. Rebecca McKendry and Graham Skipper here at Panic Fest 2021. This is what we got so far. Number 7, Hellraiser Revelations. Number 6, Hellraiser Deader. Number 5, Hellraiser Inferno. Number 4, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. We will have the top 3 picks when we return after the 5-minute intermission. And we are back. Okay, so I gave you the rundown of the list so far before we went to intermission. You just enjoyed the end credits theme from our number 4 pick, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. The name of that band is Motorhead, is that right?
Did you seriously just... Lemmy is God.
Clay,
it's something like
Bravo.
It's
Bravo,
something like Motorhead.
Man.
It's something that's a knockoff of Motorhead. Metalhead.
It's Motorhead. I can't hear the music that's playing, but Motorhead is on Hellraiser 3. So I'm just going to assume that's what's playing.
So anyway,
you were there for our heavy metal episode, right, Clay?
Oh yeah, but I'm pretty sure I said 9 million times, I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm out of my depth. I was a child, Rebecca.
It's so charming.
I was a child.
True. It's true. I keep
2 years old when
that.
when Motorhead was popular. Okay. I guess
so
feel free
old,
to
Rebecca.
roast me in the Twitch. I don't know. This is not a music
We're
show.
old
I don't
people.
pretend to know anything about music.
No. It's
okay.
It's okay.
But that was, I guess that's the most shocking thing I've ever said on the show.
It's
everybody
one of
just went. Everybody
Motorhead?
just went white.
That'd be a great
Is
t-shirt.
it Metalhead? It's something.
It's Motorhead with a question mark.
Motorhead with a question mark. I'm making that for you, Clay, for your next birthday.
It's just trying to shout out the cool Hellraiser song. Okay. Now it's time for some plugs. I guess if there's anybody still on the stream that hasn't just closed their computer in horror that I besmirched the good name of Motorhead. Adam, this is the end of the first weekend of Panic Fest 2021. Do you want to tell everybody? Obviously, if they're watching this, they're generally aware of what you guys are doing and all the cool shit that's happening. But do you want to give everybody a heads up of what to expect in week 2 of Panic Fest?
Yeah, so if you are unaware and that you're just tuning in, Panic Fest still has another full week ahead of us. And then virtually, so whether you live around Kansas City or not, you can attend anywhere in the country. You go to panicfilmfest.com, check out the lineup. You can buy individual tickets, a full fest pass. There's a whole bunch of stuff, including Colors of the Dark special that they did with Travis Stevens and Barbara Crampton for Jacob's wife. And that's available now. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's over 60 new movies, and features and shorts from around the world. And yeah, you can just jump in with an individual film if you want, or get a full fest pass. There's still plenty of time to watch everything. And then Clay, I too like the Motorheads, but there's a lot of chatter in here about your love for Mamma Mia, and people are
my love of Mamma Mia. You said?
Oh yes,
Yeah. They know you, Clay.
Yeah.
They know.
Well, Mamma Mia is I don't know. I don't have time to debate Motorhead versus Mamma Mia, and I don't think that the listeners would enjoy the outcome of that anyway. So
Motorhead, they're a band we like. Motor, lots of Motorheads, yeah.
See, now we've accidentally stumbled onto something really potent.
And Graham, I have
powerful.
to give you this message. Whatever happens with the top 3, we will still have Chicago.
Wow, we'll still have Chicago.
Oh my!
Wow,
sure
it's like someone delivered a personal ad to Graham. In the
Yeah,
middle
I don't
of
know.
our show.
That could either be a term of endearment or a direct threat.
Could be a threat.
I don't know.
What kind of trouble have you gotten up to in Chicago, Graham?
Too much trouble.
Too much trouble there
stories.
in the Windy
Yeah.
City.
Okay,
Okay, that's what's coming up at Panic Fest. Rebecca, what do you want to draw people's attention towards?
So, Colors of the Dark, we are at Panic Fest right now. You can see our interview, as Adam mentioned, with Barbara Crampton and Travis Stevens, other things that I'm up to right now. Colors of the Dark on the Fangoria Podcast Network. You can also find our Patreon shows, which are where we do really weird shit. That's our deep cut shows. And so we tend to put kind of our more commercial or bigger release horror, the stuff that's like coming to Netflix and stuff like that on the regular show. But if you want weird Mexican borderline porn, that's some deep cut stuff that goes to our Patreon. So yeah. Those are the 2 main things right now.
Okay. Graham, what do you want to let people know about from your side? I know you've got your basement show.
Yeah, well, speaking of weird Mexican borderline porn, yeah, so every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific on Spoon Network, if you go into your app store and search for Spoon, I have a show called Down in the Basement. It's a live show every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific. We talk about all things horror, and it's very cool. It's actually very similar to Twitch. It's sort of like if you're listening to a podcast and then you can text along with me. You can even call into the show like a regular radio show, and you can tell me how wrong you think I am. The other night we talked about horror movies that have verses in the title, and then people, would call in and write in talking about different monsters that they think would be fun to like pitch against each other in a battle, and who would we think would win. It was a really fun discussion, and we have returning crew every week and new people joining every week. So yeah, Down in the Basement every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific on Spoon Network. And then otherwise I'm just on Twitter at Graham Skipper, and you can tell me all about the horrible things that apparently happened in Chicago.
We got to hear.
I want to hear all about. Go ahead and take me in the Chicago stuff too. I'm very.
I will. I'm having to think of all the different things that have happened in Chicago, and there's a lot.
For us, if you're watching this and you're not familiar with Screen Drafts, we have a podcast where we do this every week with people just as enthusiastic and informed as Graham and Rebecca. So check us out. We're on everywhere podcasts are, Screen Drafts. And we've also got a Patreon. Patreon.com/Screen Drafts. We do a lot of cool bonus stuff. No porn, borderline or otherwise, yet, I guess. But we do
the porn draft. How has there not been a porn draft?
I
wow, y'all.
don't know, Graham. I don't know.
That is a good
porn
question.
Parodies. You could do porn parodies.
Just porn parodies needs to be its own draft, guys.
Figuring out this is a discussion for another time.
If Mr. Holland Orgy is not number one, I don't know where I'm.
We'll bring back Graham and Rebecca for the live show we're doing at the AVN Awards in 6 months. Okay. Ryan and I on the Patreon page draft 5 film franchises, of which we've done a handful of great horror ones, and there's a lot of great horror ones yet to do. So you can check out everything we're doing over there on Patreon. I think that's good plug wise. I think it's time to get into the top 3. Adam, do you have any other reactions on Twitch you think we should be aware of before we dive into the top 3 picks?
No, just that comment that was sent to Graham has derailed his thoughts and probably fucked up the draft.
Oh, it was mind games. Oh,
ooh.
He's thinking about all the horrible things that happened in Chicago.
And they're all fond memories.
Well, here we go. We have found ourselves in the top half of the list. This is the lay of the land going forward. There are 3 picks remaining. 2 of them belong to Becca, number 3 and number 1. Graham has 1 remaining pick at number 2. And Rebecca has her veto still at her disposal. Ryan, is this how you thought this list would look halfway through?
No, not at all. But then again, I'm not as well versed as everyone else is. But I do think that this order is going to be probably the most controversial part of this. Like our top 3 is really where we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Because up until now, I do feel like there's a lot of divergent opinions that everybody might be right. But I think when we get to where we're at, I think that there's an overwhelming consensus that I feel could be bucked tonight. And could piss off a lot of people, or they just they embrace this new trajectory of a top 3, and they're beloved. But I doubt that will happen.
There is no word in the English language that Graham Skipper has less use for than the word consensus.
Right. Or beloved.
So let's get into the top 3. Here we go. I believe it was sent to me a while ago. Is that right, Rebecca? Okay,
I sent it as soon as we came back from break.
Okay, gotcha. No question in Rebecca's mind, based on where we're at, what ought to be at number 3. She attempted to play it back at number 5, and it was vetoed. So Graham managed to get it at least this high. At number 3, Rebecca has selected Hellraiser 4, Bloodlines.
So Bloodlines is the one that infamously is directed by Alan Smithy. It was originally directed by Kevin Yeager, and then the studio took control of it. They brought in Joe Chappelle. Joe Chappelle shot, I believe it's like over 30 minutes worth of footage for it. And then Kevin Yeager petitioned the DGA to take his name off the project because of that. And then it ended up going to an Alan Smithy. So in that, most people kind of think like, oh, it must be absolutely awful if the director didn't want to put their name on it. What I have found with this movie is it's a couple of different movies because it starts in the Baroque period, like 17th century Baroque period. And then we're in the 1990s, and then we're in space in 2127, I believe. It's somewhere around there.
Yep.
So it's kind of a hot mess in that capacity. When you watch it, it's zooming all around and you're going back and forth. But the reason that I was going to play this, that's why I was going to put it a little bit lower, is I do consider it to be somewhat of a hot mess how it's working with all the different timelines. But that said, what I do like about this one is when they're in the 17th century Baroque period, that shit is fucking awesome. Yeah. Like Adam Scott is in that, long hair, just the horrificness of it. The idea of Pinhead and the puzzle box fits so perfectly with that period. The idea of just the gluttony and the, kind of just the over the topness of it and experiencing life to the full it is everything of like, portraits and just, the splendor of it all. It just fits so perfectly. And then to see these guys, these like floppy wigs and them turning into total monsters and the idea of experiencing everything, it all fits so perfectly. And so I don't necessarily like the 90s stuff as well, but I do like what they do with it. The idea that they have literally conjured a demon, that they have conjured a Cenobite into this body of a female that they call Angelique. And that she survives, but she still is a slave to this master who has kind of conjured her and passing it down through the bloodline. And then when we get to space, it gets a little hokey for me, but I like the ambition behind it, that this guy who is on the spaceship is still part of this kind of bloodline who controls the demon. And he has literally crafted the spaceship to be a lament configuration. That's a bold fucking choice. So, okay, I'm going to go with it. But what will make me play this on the list and say, you know what? It's a real fun movie is all the stuff in the 17th century. The origin story, I love.
A lot of bold choices in this. Yeah, it almost seemed inevitable that they would tie in sort of the Marquis de Sade type of thing into this movie at some point. And I got to say, I didn't like this one as much as 3 because, as you said, Rebecca, the 3 timelines doesn't totally coalesce. But the idea of giving a demon a body to inhabit, the sort of possession thing via creating like an empty skin suit and then having it like literally fill the skin suit, and the way they shoot it where it's like this like empty draping thing and then it's like inflating is really gnarly. And one of the most interesting ways I've ever seen that concept executed in a movie. So some really memorable images in this flick. Graham, you vetoed this to get it higher. Are you happy with it here at 3?
I'm thrilled. Full disclosure, this was my number 2. I'm a really, really big fan of this movie. This was the first Hellraiser sequel that I saw. Scared the hell out of me. And what I appreciate about this movie the most, and what I really love about Clive Barker's work in general, is that Barker tends to create a little bit of a huge, rich mythology. And he just gives you like a taste of it. And that's what's so brilliant about the original film. And certainly we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what they do here with this is I think they do a great job of expanding the mythology without explaining too much. We just get a little bit of a bigger glimpse of how things work. I love Angelique. I love the whole idea of sort of a demon on the run. I love the weird sexual tension between her and Pinhead. I love seeing Adam Scott like sort of deteriorate through the ages and just being kind of pissed off that he's sort of cornered himself into being immortal. I like the stuff in space. I love anything in space. I love watching horror franchises figure out, okay, how do we get this horror monster into space? Like, what does that look like? And I think I think the best possible way to do that with this franchise is to have somebody make a space station into an actual lament configuration. Like, brilliant. I love it. One thing about this movie that I find really interesting is originally this was going to be a TV series, and that's why it's so sort of fragmented. This is going to be kind of an anthology TV series where we were going to follow the lament configuration through the ages, and every episode was going to be kind of a different age. So that's where it sort of originated. And then, of course, it morphed into the movie that we see now. I'm also just thrilled that finally, I think this is the first one, an Alan Smithy film is on a draft. That just makes me very, very happy.
And so high on a draft.
It's so high on a draft, I know.
Number 3
is very high. I suppose we could do an Alan Smithy draft at some point.
Oh, that would be so fun.
That'd be fun. For
we
those
would
who
need
don't
some
know,
real sickos like Graham and Rebecca who are willing to watch all these movies.
Every single one of them.
By the way, for those who don't know, because some people don't know, Alan Smithy is the name that when somebody wants their name taken off of a project as director, that's the name that is given to the project from that point forward. So you have to really hate the movie you're working on to say, I want to be replaced by the name Alan Smithy. So that's what we mean when we say Alan Smithy.
All right, Ryan, we've got Hellraiser Goes to Space. Not as much space as I would have liked. When I'm promised a space sequel, I am expecting a lot of it to take place in space and not just sort of like 10 minutes of wraparound story. So it's really, what do you think of Hellraiser 4, Hellraiser Goes Back in Time?
That's what I liked about it, though. I think if we just kind of did, Leprechaun in space with Pinhead, it would not have been good. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I'm very happy that this was here. I think this was my number 3 too, and it really just boils down to it's ambitious. It's like what Rebecca was saying. There's a lot of ambition behind this movie, and I feel like it harkens much more to the first two than it does to the third, which I also appreciated. I love the third one. I loved kind of how fucking wild it was, but this was a nice, like, kind of back to the roots a little bit with some wild, obvious, diversions. But those I enjoyed. I loved the journey through time. I thought that was such an interesting thing. I mean, it really lives up to the ambition of what Hellraiser kind of does, which is sort of expands your brain. You're sort of trying. It's a little like dream mythology, but even more so like sadomasochistic. There's a lot of. I wish there were more of that in this, more sex. Honestly, there's a lot of. But there are a lot of great things in this that I just really, really enjoyed. I liked the toys and sort of the toy maker and the sort of toy aspect of it. I like that third part in space because it felt like a shoot 'em up. It felt like we were now fucking doing like, Alien or something. And then it tied in for me with the rest of the movie to a large, it really did not feel like anything was shoehorned in, except for, like what Rebecca was saying, that present time
90s.
It's just that's obviously a little off from the rest of the movie, but again, didn't really bother me because I did like the characters and I liked what they were trying to do with this one. So I find this whole series to be really interesting, and I'm excited to go forward beyond what I've seen, just because you have no fucking idea what you're going to get with each new entry. And this one was one of those, like, wow, okay, they're doing this now. It's a good one. So
I do like. Oh no, go Rebecca.
Oh, I was just going to say this one actually gets pretty close to like what Clive Barker was intending as far as like the development of the box itself. In his original stories, it's a music box. It's not even like it's a puzzle box, but it plays music, and they incorporate it very subtly in this one. Right. Whereas in the first ones, there's a musical motif that goes with it, but it's much more like a Jaws thing where it's like Christopher Young composes this very particular score that accompanies it. But in this, there is like tinkling music that kind of bleeds in. I like what they do with the box in this.
Yeah, me too.
I love the idea that this guy designed a like mixed use skyscraper that's like offices and residential, and the lobby is this dimly lit thing with a bunch of gigantic clockwork pieces swirling around. Very 90s. But I like that it tied in too to 3, and then 3 tied in to 2 with bringing like the tape with the Kirsty, and I like that even if they're wildly different, they do connect. They go through great pains to make it one thing. And of course, this is the introduction of the Marchand stuff, which becomes very, very I don't know. Maybe they referenced Marchand in the first 2, but this is the introduction of the bloodline that then they call back to.
This one also gives us a couple different Cenobites than we've seen so far. In the first 3, aside from like our weird like CD ones, it's Chatterer, Butterball, female Cenobite. How fucking wrong is that? Yeah. Female Cenobite and Pinhead. But this one brings in the Wire twins, which were from the comic. And they get a little different. Yeah.
All right. There you go. At number 3, Hellraiser 4, Bloodlines. Okay. Graham has sent me his pick at number 2. He said when he won the trivia, he selected the drafter A position because he said he had big plans for number 2.
The chat is very scared about what he's going to do here.
I was going to say, I just remembered. So Graham had very specific plans for the second spot. Adam, you say that the Twitch is trepidatious about what this might be.
I think maybe with good reason, but yeah, they're very concerned, knowing that, well, that he loved Bloodline so much, and where he's going to place number 2. There's a lot of concern.
Look,
here.
let's just say that we're watching this on the internet right now.
Becca's
not doing it. You're not doing it.
Anybody who thought Graham was not going to try and get Bloodlines high on this list, as Graham pointed out himself, is not that familiar with Graham. Because he does love space. Graham loves space so much.
I love space.
Okay, here we go. And of course, Rebecca does still have her veto. So she has to agree with Graham's pick at number 2 for it to remain there. Here we go. At number 2. Let's see, how many times has this happened? So at number 5, we had the 5th Hellraiser film. At number, that's the only other one. What I'm saying is that this is another one that lines up sequel number
with its
and
number.
Position on the list. At number 2, Graham has selected Hellbound, Hellraiser 2.
Yeah, come on, everybody. This has got to be a number 2. Yeah, I'm not going to do you wrong like that. This movie's fantastic. A lot of people might argue that this maybe should be number 1. I think that I look at Hellraiser and then Hellbound as sort of analogous to Alien and Aliens. You basically have the essential elements of Hellraiser that then in Hellbound they just ramp up, they make bigger, they expand the mythology. We have the characters that are now dealing with much larger problems, astonishingly, than even they were in the first movie. I think that the character of Dr. Channard is one of the all-time great movie villains. He's so deliciously evil, and sort of, for lack of a better word, like melodramatic. Like it's just a beautiful, big, grand guignol performance that he gives, especially once he is in fact a Cenobite. I love Kirsty's performance in this, the great Ashley Lawrence. I love the return of Julia, because Julia really is the villain of the first movie. And I think people kind of forget that, people focus on Pinhead or even on Frank, but Julia is really like the big bad. And so I love that we get more of her here in the sequel. I love this movie a lot. It's legitimately frightening. The effects are amazing. We have some of the most iconic imagery of the whole series in this film. It deserves to be here, I think, at number 2.
All right, Hellraiser 2, Hellbound at number 2. This is where I don't get a say in this. This is where I would put this as well. A lot of cool stuff in it. I wanted them to maybe spend some more time in the things they teased when they're running through I don't know where they are. They're in someone's brain, or they're in a dream space, that they're in another level that's closer to hell when they're going through all of the tunnels and they run past the circus that they don't stop. I wanted them to go to the circus is what I'm saying. It was cool. I was like, oh, they're going to fucking go to this circus. And then she just keeps running. Cool movie. I agree with everything Graham said. Rebecca, how do you feel about the second movie in the second spot?
I have to say, I have been debating, even during this actual draft, trying to push part 2 to number 1, to the number 1 spot. This to me is the best, but I'll say why I'm going to let it stay at number 2 when we get to the number 1 spot. But this to me is the best of the franchise. This is Julia's story. And for me, Julia is the villain of Hellraiser. It is not Pinhead. It's not Frank. It's not any of that stuff. It is Julia. And this is Julia's movie. And so the Cenobites come in and out, but it's Julia's story. And this for me is really the idea of pleasure and pain, because that's Julia. She sums it up. She is pleasure and pain all mixed into one. He has to go through absolutely heinous shit to get to her. And then it continues. And then he knows heinous shit is eventually going to happen to him. But being with her is his ultimate pleasure. And so for me, this one fucked me up when I saw it. Like I saw this way too young. The maggot on the arms, even though they don't exist, it's not even a huge part of the movie. But just seeing that quick glimpse of the bugs eating his arms just wrecked me as a kid. I could handle him slicing it himself with a fucking straight razor, but bugs, that was too much. So this one for me, I still like personally, this is the one that I kind of look at as like, this is Hellraiser. But I'm going to let it go at number 2 for reasons I will discuss momentarily.
All right, Rebecca, tempted with the idea of trying to get Hellbound at the top of this list, but decides not to. I love in this movie with the movers, they come in and they find the mattress that's soaked with blood, and they're like, whoa, what the hell? But in the room, there's already packed up boxes with like the movers logo on them. Like they've just been packing boxes around this bloody mattress and didn't realize that it was there until later. That amused me deeply. Ryan.
Yes.
Hellbound at number 2. Like this is one of the sequels that you hear just kind of out in the world is like, oh, is this one of those times when the sequel is better than the first movie? I've certainly heard in the past that this is perhaps one of those. And then watching them with fresh eyes here, I lean towards more that the first is the one I enjoyed more. But this is certainly a spectacular sequel. How do you feel about this at number 2?
I just disagree, and I'm going to implore Dr. McKendry to use her veto here, just simply because again. This is a bigger, badder, more fucked up movie than the first one. And it honestly, like of all of them, it really feels the most grandiose, the most macabre, the most. I mean, it's just like, I got so unsettled watching it this time. It put me right back to when I was fucking 12 pissing my pants. I mean, I'm serious that the last 20 minutes of this movie are like fucking like high level suspense. I mean, it's so bizarre how this movie wraps up and so really disturbing. Again, I want to bring back up Christopher Young's score, which I think in this one is even more kind of under the skin than that first one. His
score is better in this one by far.
It just elevates this movie to what feels like it's like the royalty of
it's
horror.
Like a booming orchestral like 40s monster movie score.
Yeah,
I love that about it. It gives, as you said, Ryan, it lends, and in the first one too, but it lends this very like modern, hyper gory 80s kind of story, a connection to a more classical monster past, and kind of makes it feel more epic, especially that in the first one where it's very, contained in that house. It gives this whole thing this much more epic feel.
Well, and also, I mean, beyond the score, I do think that this movie, what really makes it function on a very high level is that it kind of underlines a lot of the big themes of the first one, which were so different than where we end up in a lot of ways down the road, which is that your enemies, your most evil creatures in this movie are, it's like Dr. Channard is fucking like, diabolical when you really when everything is said and done, and he gives a really just unsettling performance, like so much. I was looking into that guy after I watched the movie, and he actually played, I don't know if anybody's seen The Father, but he actually played the father back like when that ran on Broadway.
Wow, you're talking about the Anthony Hopkins Oscar
movie,
which is phenomenal, by the way.
It's incredible. And he plays, I feel, this with the same degree of like, wait, there is some deep reservoirs happening with this guy. It's just so good. I mean, I really just think it takes a great actor to play a really evil person, and he just does it perfectly. But again, kind of also this one is such a great like piece with the first one. I love that. I love how they sort of bookend one another and they sort of speak to one another in a lot of ways. And Julia is just like, oh my God, like what the fuck? Where did she come from? I mean, she's great in the first one, but when you get here, it's like, okay, this is just a new level. It's so good. So I implore you.
So Ryan is saying it is the Bride of Frankenstein to Hellraiser's Frankenstein. Rebecca, Ryan jumped on the scale and wrote it all the way down. Did he convince you to use your veto?
Nope.
All right. Rebecca is immune to Ryan's charms. The veto is not going to be used. And Rebecca has already sent me her pick at number 1. Adam.
I tried, everyone.
Adam, what is the temperature on Twitch? Do people feel good about Hellbound 2? Are there any guesses as to what is going to top the list?
No guesses so far. I think people are just assuming what we're all maybe assuming here, what's going to be number 1, but maybe that's not true. I don't know. But Rebecca's done some crazy things before. But people generally assumed this was going to happen. They like this placement. A lot of people think that it could and maybe should have been number 1, but they all assume number 2 is where it would land. But yeah, then they even noted, for a franchise built upon temptations, the drafters have opted not to go with any of them.
That was good.
Well,
I'm here to do it justice, guys. Not given to my whims. I'm here to do it historic.
Yeah, we've seen. That's a good point, Rebecca. We've seen how well giving into temptation works out for all the people in these movies. I think we've learned a thing or two watching all of these Hellraiser flicks. Okay, Rebecca has sent me her pick at number 1, and Graham does not have a veto. Can you imagine? Graham does not have a veto.
I'm not casting judgment.
So this is the final list. The Screen Drafts Hellraiser franchise draft, brought to you live from Panic Fest 2021 with Rebecca McKendry and Graham Skipper, is as follows. Number 7, Hellraiser Revelations. Number 6, Hellraiser Deader. Number 5, Hellraiser Inferno. Maybe Deader is a good title. You have to like pause afterwards because it's so atonal. Like it's stuck in your mouth. You have to say Deader. And then you got to kind of like, there's a moment for everybody to be like, is that what he said was Deader? That's strange. Number 5, Hellraiser Inferno. Number 4, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. Number 3, Hellraiser 4, Bloodlines. Number 2, Hellbound. Hellraiser 2. And the number 1 Hellraiser film of all time, as selected by Dr. Rebecca McKendry, but of course, the very first Hellraiser.
Yeah, so I considered, and I, again, will state, I consider the second one to be my favorite just because it really does use Julia to the, as far as you can push it. But this one is all Clive Barker. And that's how I'm going to look at it, it is all Clive Barker. He directed it. He wrote it. It's based off his short story. It ended up getting an X rating, and he had to cut out huge chunks of scenes that he had put in that were like super sexual and gory. It is everything that Clive wanted to do. This was his first thing he ever directed. Mm-hmm. And so he made a choice not to do the second one. Instead, Tony Randall directed his script. Tony Randall was one of the editors on the first one. But this one, for me, if I think like, what is Clive, this is it. And this also is his original story to a degree. In his original story, Kirsty isn't the daughter. It's like a romantic tryst where it's Rory, Kirsty, Julia, or Rory. Yeah, it is. Frank becomes Rory in the original story. Yeah. Kirsty, Frank, and Julia, and they're all like fucking each other in this weird kind of circle, and then Frank opens the puzzle box and it goes from there. But I could see why they made Kirsty his daughter, because it was the 80s and it was all about teens, and we have to have some young hot teen girl that we're going to follow through the whole thing. So Ashley Lawrence becomes that. But for me, when I'm looking at this is infused Clive Barker. Skinless Frank with a white suit on is as Clive Barker-y as it gets. Seductive Julia, just like ready to fuck the walls if she can, that is Clive Barker. And the way that the pinheads, that the Cenobites are in this, as it moves forward in the franchise, the Cenobites themselves become really significant characters, and it becomes a lot less about the drama and the characters and more about kind of what the Cenobites are doing to them. And this It is about the characters and what they're doing to each other. And oh yeah, there are some Cenobites trying to come fuck up Christy. And so it's a completely different vibe. And that goes back to the original Hellbound Heart story, which is really like a Harlequin romance novel with some weird demonic things that show up at the end. And so that's why I think this should be number one. If we consider this to be a Clive Barker franchise, all from his brain and experiences, this is it.
Yeah, I dig this movie a lot. I liked it okay when I saw it the first time, and rewatching it recently for this, I was really struck by how well constructed and tight the story is. You know, you extract it from the mythology, which just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows as this goes along. This is just a good original, weird, fucked up little. As I said before, it's got sort of it invokes Dracula. It feels like it's got its origins in really classic horror storytelling. And I love when someone can infuse a really simple story with just enough mythology sort of on the periphery to make it feel grander and feel bigger, while still, as Rebecca, you said, focusing on a really well-constructed interpersonal plot. And I think this movie does that really, really well. So yeah, this is a good movie. And as you said, the Christopher Young score, even in this first one, really elevates everything. And shooting it, I don't know where the first two are supposed to take place necessarily. They made them in London.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of
supposed to be in America.
It's supposed to be in America, but there's a lot of like British people, and you know, they just the subtle differences in architecture. It just feels European the whole time, which also I think like lends it this other sort of aura of. I mean, it's lightly unsettling. Like this takes place here, but then everything is just slightly askew.
Yeah, it makes it feel surreal.
It's surreal. There you go, Ryan. That's the word. It makes it a little surreal. And there you go. And of course, the guy from Dirty Harry's got just an all-time scary face. Graham, you picked Hellbound at number 2. I have to imagine that that's because you wanted the very first Hellraiser to end up at number 1.
I look, when I go see movies, and I think this is evidence through the movies that I play on Screen Drafts. When I go see movies, the ones that I'm really drawn to are ones that are totally unique. And you know, sometimes that means they're not as good, but they're like really different and weird, and I really am attracted to that. I think that in the case of Hellraiser, it's one of those very rare moments where a film is not only completely different from every other movie ever made, and is also extremely high quality. The acting is totally top notch. The effects are some of the best that have ever graced the horror screen. And you know, it's no wonder that this is what put Clive Barker on the map. Clive Barker is my favorite author. I've read every book he's ever written. I have to say that my favorite part of the Hellbound Heart, the book that this is based on, is that he describes the Cenobites as when they first appear as smelling like vanilla. And that's a touch that I just love. It's so unsettling and so weird. Yeah. And something that then when you watch the movie, you're like, yeah, I think vanilla.
Do they smell like vanilla? Chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, say back to the
chocolate chip cookies. Yeah, there you go. I mean, look, you know, what Becca said, I agree with wholeheartedly. I think this movie's a masterpiece. Like I said, when I watched it when I was like 12, you know, Pinhead's included in that pantheon of horror gods, right? Leatherface, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, and then you have Pinhead, and then you watch this movie, and it's not really so much about Pinhead, you know. It's a familial drama. It's a weird, incestuous, psychosexual, familial like thriller, with, like Becca said, demonic stuff then thrown in, and it's so captivating. It's so weirdly horny. And God knows I love a weirdly horny movie. I love it so much. I love this over Hellraiser 2, because it doesn't give us the whole mythology, because all we know is that these beings appear, and what the fuck is a Cenobite, and what are they trying to do? We know they're angels to some, demons to others. Why does that homeless dude turn into a bat at the end? We don't know, but we accept it. This movie is a masterpiece, one of the greatest horror films of all time. Absolutely deserves to be at the top of this list.
Yeah, it's got, and Graham, I know you love a weirdly horny horror movie because you're great friends with Stuart Gordon, who made some of the best of those. And I read, obviously not this movie, this was Clive Barker's baby from the beginning, but I read that Stuart Gordon was offered one of these movies at one time.
Yeah, I actually think that might have been Bloodlines, but I have never heard the story of why he turned that down. But
I know they were constantly trying to get him back in to the franchise, but I assume it was a money issue.
I would assume. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I would just assume that like if you're trying to get somebody to direct a part 4 of something, you are likely going to pay them less unless it is a like massive big budget reboot.
Right.
Yeah. That it would either have been and Adam says that it was Bloodline. I was thinking it was either money or perhaps studio control of like, you have to do the script, you have to do it this way, which is something that I know Stuart did not respond well to.
And that one had, from what I read, constant script changes and disagreements as well. And of course with the La Chapelle reshoots and stuff, all of that changed dramatically. Ryan, the first Hellraiser at number 1. You lobbied hard for Rebecca to veto and try and get 2 at number 1. But how do you feel about the first Hellraiser?
I mean, I love this movie. Don't get me wrong. And again, like Rebecca gave a beautiful and profound argument in defense of this positioning of this movie. And I agree. I think it's a really, I watched it a couple nights ago and I was just like, wow, this is such a cool domestic drama with all of this other fucking, like, it's just a great movie about, of the underbelly, the sexual weird underbelly of certain of families, and how, another thing going back to part 2 is that the acting in this movie is really, really fucking good. Everybody's very, very good in it. And you don't see too many horror movies that kind of embrace that. They're kind of so focused on special effects and what, the mythology is going to be. And Pinhead's kind of an afterthought in this movie. He sort of shows up, the Cenobites show up, at the correct times as opposed to all the time. And that to me just was such an interesting, the more you watch these movies, the more sort of succinct and powerful this movie ends up becoming by virtue of that fact that you just aren't involved in that world. It's only touched upon, like you said, Clay, it's a mythology that's only hinted at. And yet that gains power as the movie really moves into that final act where you're like, oh, wow, this is really getting fucking gnarly. That said, like the basic killings, I mean, the hammer killings are some of the most like horrific parts of this movie. And that again speaks to like how devious and like just nasty Julia is, who also I'm looking here on her IMDb page. And again, Clive gathered some great fucking actors. She is an Olivier Award-winning stage actress who played Stella in Streetcar and all kinds of great roles. So I think that's a big part of selling something like this, something that really kind of takes a lot of, it's a leap of faith in a lot of ways, I think, for an actor to take something like this on. And yet there's such juiciness to this role that you could just see any actor being like, if I'm given this and I'm in the right hands, I'm going to fucking kill this. And she does. Everybody does. If you really think about it, everybody is really, including Frank, who I think is the nastiest and seediest uncle one could ever fucking imagine.
Come to daddy.
Yeah. And it's, and one final thing, this is the most sexual of them all. As Graham said, it's very horny, but there's also a lot of like interesting thoughts and feelings about like the subversiveness of sex. I love the scene where she's looking at his photographs of him with all the other women in different positions. And you're like, wow, this is not something I'm watching with my mom. You know, it's a harsh fucking movie, but I loved it. I love it. And I'm really glad to hear it's here at number one when all is said and done.
And we can't.
I just wanted to jump in and piggyback on something. You know, structurally, this movie is really interesting to me because, Clive Barker was coming off of being a very successful stage director. You know, he was doing a whole lot of stage stuff and really innovative, interesting, weird stage stuff. And when you watch this movie, I mean, it's 100% it could be a play.
Yeah.
You know, this movie is not reliant on, you know, like you said, the big special effects. It's like, it relies on the performances and it relies on the relationships between the characters. And it's all just in this house.
Most of the actors he had worked with before.
Okay.
Like Doug Bradley, and I'm fairly sure Julia, they were from.
Well, Doug Bradley, he grew up with. I mean, Doug Bradley was his like childhood friend. That was one of the first members of his theater company called the Dog Company. And they used to all live in a house together. They in their house that they lived in, Clive Barker would apparently, it was like they had no money for electricity or heat, and so they would just sit by candlelight, and Clive would write stories on the wall in paint.
Stop it.
And he would just write these stories, and so the walls were just totally covered in stories and poems and drawings that he would make.
Wow.
And then, of course, eventually, when they got kicked out, they had to just paint over everything. So in his biography, he talks about how there's some house, some flat in London that's just covered in his original art that nobody would ever know because it's been painted over, however many times.
I also read that he was a hustler during the same time period, that he had to work as a hustler because he was so broke, and that's where a lot of kind of the sexuality of pleasure and pain came in to the whole Hellbound Heart mythos.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want his life.
Stuff.
I want
and
his
I love
movie.
how I do really appreciate, I enjoy the more, flamboyant Pinhead of the later movies, but I do like in this movie, the lead Cenobite and the Cenobites at all are sort of these, they don't have autonomy. They don't have any kind of POV. They're these like emissaries of this sort of unstoppable force of evil. And I like it. Is it's either in this one or the second one where she's like, no, don't chase me. This other guy escaped from you. And they're like, oh, okay, well, all right, we'll get him first then. Like they're not, driven by their own desires.
They're reasonable demons.
They're reasonable demons. They've got rules. They've got
can negotiate.
And that becomes a huge thing of the entire franchise, where it's like, you're going to come take me, but if I can get you 5 souls, you'll let me go.
Yeah.
And this one, like, you glimpse the engineer in this. He's the weird wormy looking thing with the head in the hallway.
Oh, sure.
And I have a feeling that Clive intended a bigger scene with him in the first one, but that he didn't like the prosthetic effect, so they ended up cutting it. But the second one gets a little bit more into Leviathan and controlling hell. That's what I have the tattoo of, is Leviathan, because I relate to him. But yeah, he's the master of hell and controlling everything, and he's the one who controls the negotiations and where the souls go and everything.
Fascinating. So there's still a lot. Ryan, it sounds like you and I still have a lot to dig into with the Hellraiser franchise.
If you just to cut in, I looked it up. The name of the biography that I read of Clive Barker is called The Dark Fantastic. It's wonderful. So if you want to learn more about him and about his career and his life, read The Dark Fantastic. Great. It's very, very good.
And I'll jump in here. I saw it pop up on the Twitch chat that everybody was like, is there a Hellraiser porn? It's called Cockraiser. So enjoy, y'all.
Called Cockraiser. Look for that placing at least in number 2 or 3, again, in our porn parody draft that we'll be doing live from the Adult Video Awards. And I think it should not be understated. This is what stuck with me through all these movies. It's incredible that a movie series was able to make having hooks hooked into your skin and stretched just sort of a archetypal thing they just kept going back to. That is so gross and so disturbing and so awful every time it happens. Like, I can't imagine. It's wild that just became sort of like, oh, that's what they do in the Hellraiser movies. But like in the first movie, when people saw that, I want to imagine it was uniquely disturbing. Like, I can't think of anything like that had been done before in mainstream, theatrical movies.
Oh, I don't know.
It's so gross, Ryan. It's so
there was
gross.
a whole decade prior to 1987 full of fucking hook deaths and
But like the stretching, the hooking and the stretching.
It's very disturbing. I'm with you.
It is disturbing, but honestly, I'm sure we were doing something like that in the 1970s. The 70s was where we were pushing every transgressive limit that we could, both on mainstream stages and in the more like underground grindhousey theaters.
Right.
So though the skin stretching, but again, I think that the element of the skin stretching, I think comes a lot from body modification, which I know Clive Barker was paying attention to at the time. And there was actually a very famous club in New York City that I swear I read somewhere that he'd been to a couple times called Cell Block something, but it was an actual body modification club. But I know that was kind of his understanding of what the Cenobites would look like extreme body modification to the point where they no longer looked like humans because they'd been completely modified beyond that. But yeah, skin stretching with hooks is like a big thing in body mod.
I've got to read this autobiography. It sounds like that's the movie that I want. I want Clive Barker's
Get the Clive Barker story.
Movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gnarly stuff. All right. Well, we could talk about Hellraiser all night because there are many, more so than a lot of horror franchises, a lot of interesting facets to dive into. But I think we did a bang up job. Rebecca McKendry and Graham Skipper. Round of applause.
Woo!
For our drafters this evening.
Did it.
A little upset we didn't get to talk about Hellworld, but that's okay.
I know. I love Hellworld. I love Hellworld.
Yeah, I don't love it as a Hellraiser movie, but I love it as a movie.
It's very fun.
I don't want Pinhead in it. I just want it as like a weird internet knockoff movie.
And Henry Cavill's first movie. So if you're a Henry Cavill fan, check out Pinhead Goes to the Internet.
Pinhead Goes to the Internet. Okay. Hey, well, we're in the vicinity of our 2-hour goal. This wasn't too bad. Adam, are there any final thoughts from our viewers online about the totality of the list here, all 7 picks?
Yeah. People seem generally happy with the list overall. The shocking, I think, thing for everybody was Revelation, seeing that when I put up the whole list. So remember that was on the list.
Better than you think it is.
It's always fun to remember what happened at the beginning of the show.
So I had Hellworld in 8, and I was also Judgment. I would have put above Revelations. Hellseeker,
Judgment,
nowhere.
Hellseeker, nowhere. Judgment, I have a lot of fondness for. Very, very quickly, I have to share my anecdote about Judgment. When I used to be a child actor once upon a time, and I used to do shows in Fort Worth, Texas at Casa Manana Theater. I would do a lot of children's shows, and one of the shows that I was the star of was a show called Nobody Loves a Dragon. And there was this actor who played the dragon, this guy Paul, that I reconnected with on Facebook one day. And I went to his page and it was just filled with like Pinhead imagery. And I was like, I guess maybe this guy's a horror fan. And then I asked him, I was like, why do you have all this Pinhead? He goes, I'm the new Pinhead. And he's the dude, he's Pinhead in Hellraiser Judgment.
Wow.
So I'll post it to Twitter. I have the picture, the cast picture of me as like a 10-year-old Prince Robin next to a guy in a dragon suit. And that is Paul Taylor, star of Hellraiser Judgment.
Wow, your mind must have been blown.
I was like, what?
Yeah, I appreciate that one just because Tunicliffe really did try to do something different with it and really push it into a different facet of hell. And so I'm appreciative of for that. John Gulager grosses me out to no end in that movie. But
I love the vomiting like angels at the beginning. Like, what's that about? I don't know what it's about.
So much vomit in that movie.
John Gulager, son of Clu Gulager, the star of season 3 of Project Greenlight.
Yes, that is him. So he plays the assessor in this movie. And it's all part of like the judgment of hell, how their court system works. Mm-hmm. And it's not great. I think they had a budget of $300,000. You could see the strings of the budget. You're just looking at seams through most of the movie because it's basically just one room. But that said, he's trying something different. And I applaud Gary for that. Yeah.
And all of the goopy shit he was responsible for from the beginning. Shout out to Gary.
Sure. The special effects in that movie are off the chart. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, a 5 title draft we need to do sometime is the Project Greenlight movies.
I'll go down that path with you.
Oh no, you don't want to. I just said something that Dave would
provoke,
really stretch the limits of our patience on this show. Okay. That is the list. That is the show. Ryan, I forgot to do predictions quickly. How did you do on your predictions?
I did pretty well. I didn't see Hellworld, but now I want to, and that was on my list just because I thought it was a really killer title. But beyond that, 2 was, I had 7 was Deader, 6 was Hellworld, 5 was Bloodline, 4 was Inferno, 3 was 3, 2 was 1, and 1 was 2. So you got
no placements correct, but
not at all.
But we all are winners in my book because we had such a great time watching these Hellraiser flicks. Okay, look, you can find Screen Drafts on Twitter at Screen Drafts, on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm at Clay Keller. Ryan, you're on Twitter.
Marker Ryan 625.
Marker Ryan 625. Rebecca, where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
I am Rebecca McKendry on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And please check out Colors of the Dark, the show I co-host with Elric Kane, who is another frequent drafter.
Oh, yes, another one of our absolute favorites. Graham, where can people find you online?
At Graham Skipper on Twitter and Down in the Basement on Spoon.
Down the Basement on Spoon. And Adam, there's still a lot more Panic Fest coming up. Is there any other information about that or about your theater, the Screenland Theater, that you want to impart before we leave?
No, I mean, not really. Check out the fest. I mean, we're super proud of what we did here, and it's been really fun to have this interactive events. And we've had a lot of people pouring out, I should say, that have been watching. That's 3 a.m. at some places. They're staying up super late for some people, their very first Screen Drafts. So it's been a lot of people saying thanks to you guys and really pouring out the support here. So this was a total blast, and I appreciate you guys doing this. But yeah, panicfilmfest.com, lots to still enjoy. And then if you're ever in Kansas City, we I own the theater. It's a cool thing, Screenland Armor. We're always showing something weird and wild, and then we'll be doing our outdoor movies here this summer as well as indoor movies. So there you have it, a little bit of everything.
I want to come back next year. I missed you guys. That was such a good show. Stacy, Pippi, and everybody, all my Kansas City friends.
And hopefully next year, who knows, maybe we'll be able to see you guys in person as well. Thank you to Adam and Panic Fest for inviting us to do this show. I'm just tickled that there's first timers. Welcome. And gosh, people stay up till 3 a.m. are diehards. Thank you for showing up as well. Our theme song, of course, composed by Motorhead.
The Motorheads. Motorhead.
Ryan, you got to make that t-shirt.
Motorhead?
The Motorheads?
Yeah.
The Motorheads? Is that something?
It's a thing.
No,
it's a thing now. We've made it a thing.
Exactly.
Our theme music, of course, composed by Joshua Hendricks. Go to Joshua Hendricks Music for more of that, and you're going to hear a little bit of it now. One more time, thank you to Dr. Rebecca McKendry and Graham Skipper. This is the Hellraiser Screen Drafts list, brought to you live from Panic Fest 2021. Number 7, Hellraiser Revelations. Number 6, Hellraiser Deader. Number 5, Hellraiser Inferno. Number 4, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. Number 3, Hellraiser 4, Bloodlines. Number 2, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. And the number 1 Hellraiser film of all time, Clive Barker's Hellraiser.